Hello, beautiful. Welcome to the Poetry Portal. I am so grateful you are here in this space where we're going to explore transforming pain to peace, talking about how poetry is such a powerful practice to play with in our healing journey, in our journey to become the most enriched and expressed versions of ourselves. Before we get too far into anything, I want you just to close your eyes if it is safe for you to do so. If you're listening to this and driving or anything, obviously don't close your eyes, but just come into a space of stillness and silence. You can place your hand on your heart if you would like to, and take in a deep belly breath, breathing in through the nose, letting the belly rise, and then a slow exhale out through the nose. Just really grounding and anchoring yourself into this space, into this moment, preparing your body to receive, to understand, to take in, and to alchemize everything that we talk about here today. If we haven't met before, my name is Rachel White. I am a coach, author, guide. I am an accidental poet. I wrote a poem about anger years ago now, out of nowhere. I hadn't written poetry since probably primary school prior to that. And it allowed me to really alchemize and understand and express these feelings and these thoughts and these stories around anger that I was creating in my mind. And that poem about anger went into my first poetry collection, Wonder, that I wrote in 3 weeks poetry. Once I opened the portal, just started pouring out of me. And that was in a very heavy time of my life. That was in around 2019, 2020. And starting to write poetry really helped me alchemize a lot of things and a lot of heavy experiences that I was holding in my body for so long. So my hope for you is that even if you've never written a single poem or piece of poetry or read a piece of poetry before in your life, that you feel empowered to pick up your pen after you listen to this masterclass and give voice to the depth, to the emotions, to the thoughts, to the stories that are in your body in a poetic way that allows you to gain a new perspective, that allows you to alchemize, that allows you to feel, and that gives expression to so much that is within you that is just waiting to be given a voice. I want to share a quote by Georges Basque. He is a French artist, poet, previous poet throughout history. He said, "Reality only reveals itself when it is illuminated by a ray of poetry." When we think of poetry, we think of stories, analogies, metaphors, exaggerations, language used that isn't typical to the everyday language we use. And we'll talk a little bit more about language in a moment. But I think this is such a powerful summary of what poetry is, that we can think about the reality of what is happening in our life for so long and go around in circles. But when we look at what is happening and what we've been feeling and thinking through a poetic lens, we can illuminate the reality and the actual meaning of why that happened, what we really think and feel about it, and how we can actually move forward, alchemizing it through our body to maybe transform the density into lightness, the pain into peace. So let's talk a little bit around what is poetry. And I have no doubt that you've heard the word poetry before. I have no doubt that you know what a poem is. But poetry is so much more than pretty rhyming verses or speaking of things in ways that don't necessarily make sense at first glance. Poetry can be eloquent at times, but it can also be very simple and to the point at times. Poetry has the power to transport you, to open a portal to the depth of your soul or the hidden corners of your heart. Poetry is a portal. It can take you to places that aren't usually accessible through our day-to-day life or our day-to-day thinking. Poetry is what makes sense of universal experiences that are indescribable with our everyday use of language. The most common poetry you're probably exposed to currently is the music that you listen to. Music and songwriting and lyrics is a form of poetry. Not in every song. Some songs are just for the beat and for the music, but for a lot of songwriters, they write poetry and then turn it into music. And I love that that is a way that poetry is so accessible to us now. And there's probably songs you have listened to and you resonate with it so deeply and feel that finally there are these words to communicate and to express all of these things that you have been feeling and circling around thinking, but you never quite had the words to explain it. If you can relate to that through music or through poetry that you've read, then you understand already the power that poetry has and the power that the expression of poetry has to give resonance and understanding and to make sense of these universal experiences that we have as humans that are within the emotional realms of our life. The choice of words and the rhythm that we use are the keys to the portal of poetry that can transport us and take us to different places. It is the words and the verses, but the rhythm that we give poetry is a very important piece to it. Poetry doesn't have any entry requirements. So you don't need to be skilled. You don't need to be talented. You don't need to be experienced. All poetry is like good poetry because it has been expressed. If you write your poetry, it is good poetry for the moment that it is expressed in. And I think often when we think about art and creativity, we limit ourselves to our beliefs on our childhood capacity to be artistic, whether that was in art class at school, whether that was in the way someone judged or criticized something that we made and something that we created. But I want you to really own and acknowledge that you are creative. You are a creative being. And if you want to write poetry, you can write poetry. And it doesn't need to be good to the measure of any other artist, any other creator out in the world. Your poetry is a method and a practice to unravel your depth, to express yourself. And yes, like writing poetry can be a skill that you refine and polish, but that can come later. Like you can just play in the raw expression of your poetry if you so choose to. And you may be surprised at how good your writing actually is when you give yourself the opportunity to sit and write and to allow yourself to express yourself and to express the depth that you have within you. The Google definition of poetry is literary work in which the expression of feelings and ideas is given intensity by the use of distinctive style and rhythm. And I love the word intensity in that definition because we get to be intense in our poetry in a way there isn't often space for in our day-to-day life or in the way that we usually would communicate about what we're thinking or what we're feeling or the ideas we have about life and the world. We get to be intense. We get to be dramatic. We get to be delusional. We get to be like just deep drowning in our heartbreak, but also ecstatic in our joy. You get to play with such a wider spectrum of your emotions. And you get to do this in all forms of art. But I think poetry is such a beautiful way where we actually get to feel from such depth, but then bring it into words and put it into words. And words and the language that we use are such powerful things. You get to be the full of life expression of you. You get to be intense. You get to be full. And I think so many of us have these unconscious or it could be fully in your awareness, these fears and these beliefs that we're either not enough or too much. And sometimes we can kind of think both of these things. It's like I need to tone myself down, and then I'm also not enough in other areas. And poetry is a place where you're never too much. You get to be intense. You get to be the big, bright version of you. And you also get to express the inadequacy that you feel in you, and any other thoughts and feelings and ideas that you have get to be expressed through a poetic lens. And how to give your unique style and your rhythm to your poetic writing starts with you simply writing, and writing in your raw expression and just starting to write allows you to find your style. Something I talk about a lot in the realm of creativity is that often in the path to find our unique style, we go through a path of imitation, innovation, and then invention. It's okay to start by imitating. You can imitate the structure of different poems. You can imitate your favorite artists or poets. You can imitate, and then the more that you do that, you will naturally start to innovate, to add your little flair to it, to add your innovations, to add how you want to express yourself. And then through that path, you inevitably get to the invention of your unique style. And it may still contain threads of inspiration from the legacy that you have learned from and the artists that you have learned from, like the ancestry of our artistry, if you want to put it that way. But it will be your unique style. And in that style, you will find your tempo, you will find your rhythm, you will find the way that you want to express your thoughts and feelings in the world. And that is poetry, expressing yourself, and expressing yourself enough that you find your rhythm and your style. I want to talk a little bit about the limitations of our everyday language. If you are here in this space, then I know you have deep thoughts and stories that circle your mind. I know that there's all these topics and ideas that you have that you're just wishing other people would bring up so that you can talk about it, so that you can explore. But there never seems to be the right time or place, because we need to make space for these kind of things. And if we just move through life and don't put ourselves in spaces or create the spaces ourselves, then all of these things can just stay in our mind and stay in our body and go unexpressed. All of these thoughts and stories can then stay on the surface because you never give yourself space to actually unravel them or cultivate them, or like dig to the core to discover the depth of them. And this is what happens when we have a lot of like ruminating thoughts at the top of our mind, that because we don't give ourselves space to fully dive into them, we stay at a surface level for so long. But as soon as we start to have conversations, as soon as we start to bring interaction and expression to those thoughts, we then, and when we question them and when other people question them, we get to dive a little deeper and we get to explore the actual depth. And giving yourself space to write poetically is something that happens naturally. You get to the depth when you give yourself the space to express all these thoughts and stories that you want to share. And in uncovering the depth of that, you find even new things. And so often we can stay stuck at the surface and never get to these like hidden things that we're really sensing within us, but they aren't in our conscious awareness until we allow ourselves to go a little deeper within ourselves. We use language. The English language is very transactional. It's very transactional, especially when we compare it to other languages that are innately a little more romantic in their undertone, like Italian or Sanskrit. English is very much like a language that, of course, we can expand our vocabulary and gain new words, but in our day-to-day use of the English language, it doesn't really give space for romanticism or for poetry. We need to create that ourselves and be creative in the way we use language. And in my poetic program, we talk about being creative in the way that we use language, in the way that we use grammar. There isn't space for in the like proper use of the English language. So we get to be creative and we get to invent words. Shakespeare invented words in his poetry that we still use. Like the word bedroom was created by Shakespeare. And you can find online if you want, like there's a list of so many words that are just like everyday use now that were created by Shakespeare because there wasn't a word for it yet that he could use to express what he wanted to in his poetry. And we get to do that as well. We get to create language. We get to be creative with language through a poetic lens. When we start writing poetry and when we start allowing ourselves to be expressed in this way, we naturally open this channel and open many possible portals that we can enter to notice the natural poetry in the world. And we naturally expand our vocabulary. We naturally expand the words that we have access to because we notice the lyrics of the songs we're listening to more. We notice the words other people use in their poetry. We notice the rhymes and the near rhymes that are used in poetic pieces we use, and we expand our access to express ourselves. If we keep our vocabulary to our everyday use of the English language, we limit the way that we can really express and talk about what we're thinking and feeling. And in the expansion of our vocabulary and in our license to be creative with language, we expand the way that we can understand our beautiful body and our beautiful mind and the depth within ourselves by the way that we express it. You can also express big things in very simple language, and that is an art within itself as well. So like an example that's coming to my mind, like Cat in the Hat is a very popular child's book that is in rhyme. And it uses like very simple words. It's a children's book, but the way it uses those words and the repetition of those words, like there's poetry and there's art there. So we can still use simple words. You don't need to be a master of language. You don't need to have a big vocabulary. But when you start writing poetry, you naturally expand your vocabulary and the way that you use words, the way you express yourself, and the way you communicate. Poetry has the capacity to offer introspection within yourself, to actually reflect on the experiences you've had in your life, the things that you have gone through, and to introspect everything that you've ever thought about yourself, about life, about other people. When we look at life through a poetic lens, we start to look at our life and ourself through this poetic lens as well, and we start to think differently. We start to wire our mind differently to see the beauty, to see the romance, to see the poetry, to see the big picture, but also be able to zoom in on the little detail and see how that weaves into the big picture. We offer ourselves so much space to dive inwards, like I've talked about a lot so far. Poetry has the capacity to give us space to process our emotions. It's so important to feel our emotions in the body, but often our mind has this need to understand emotion, to understand what we're feeling, so that it feels like it's safe to let it go, to alchemize, to release the heaviness, to move into a liberated lightness. And we can feel in our body, and often the mind, like we can't think our way into feeling, but we can use poetry to bypass the thinking mind, to bring understanding to the mind that then allows us to feel. Poetry, because it uses poetic language and because it brings that soothing rhythm to the way that it expresses emotion and expresses our feeling, it softens the blow to the mind to just be told something direct about the way we're feeling or thinking and then have the ego respond. It bypasses that and allows a resonance to occur within our body. Poetry allows us to process emotions, and it gives us the space to mentally explore emotions, to explore these things that have happened to us or the way we're feeling. And it can be something that we felt in a moment, it occurred and we alchemized it in the moment, or it can be heaviness. It can be emotions that we've suppressed for our whole adult lives or a very long time. Poetry has the capacity to just bring us a moment of fun, a moment of romance with the world, a moment of flirting with the world around us, because it alters our perception of the world to see the world in a more poetic way. I love this view of poetry that not all poetry has to be deep and meaningful. Poetry can just be fun and joyous and playful, that brings us into a high frequency, that brings us in connection with our heart and our love and the joy that we have for life. And often, like, I am someone that often writes poetry about heavier things. Like, poetry for me is more a practice of alchemizing, but then there are so many like little moments of fun and joy that come through as well within those heavier pieces and in and of themselves as well. Poetry has the capacity to expand the way that you think, feel, and imagine. Poetry is a portal to thinking bigger, to viewing life at a higher level, but at a deeper level as well, to change the way you think and feel, the way you envision your life, the way you imagine, the way that you see everything connected. Because poetry has such a high capacity to bring resonance to these universal human experiences, we tie these threads together and we see how we're all connected, and we see unity in life and in nature and in emotions and in the threads that tie us all together. And it really expands the way that we can view life. And also, poetry has the capacity to heal through the resonance of our feelings. To when we read poetry through the resonance of with other people's feelings, we can alchemize and heal within ourselves. We can open this portal of feeling within our body to finally heal these things we've been holding on to through writing our own poetry and sharing it, and also through reading and hearing and listening to other people's poetry. Poetry has such a high capacity to offer space for healing, because it, like I said before, it bypasses the thinking mind and goes into the stories, which allow space for deeper understanding and acceptance, and to feel the emotions. And we need to feel what is within us in order to heal what is within us as well. Poetry, like most art, can feel really intimidating to step into and to practice and to even write your first piece if you have been conditioned to believe that you are not creative enough or talented enough to partake. And like I said earlier, if you feel or think that way, it is often childhood conditioning or some event that made you think you're not creative or you're not talented or you're not artistic. But I really, truly want you to take this away, that you are so creative, you are so talented at many things, but you don't need to be talented at writing poetry to be a poet, to write poetry, to look at life in a poetic way. You can allow yourself to simply write, to simply step into a space where you get to express yourself in a new way and see how that feels. Give yourself the space to really see how it feels to express yourself through poetry. And then you can decide, this may be something that is just a momentary thing that you do, or it may be something you fall in love with and you continue to do. Something I love about the very first round of Poetic that I did, which is the program that I run where we write poetry together. And I'm going to talk a little bit more about that at the end of this masterclass. But in the very first round, there was this person that we are like online friends. We had been in a few group programs and spaces together. We had spoken on various podcasts and all of that together. And I just felt like she would be I just felt she would thrive in the Poetic program. So I reached out to her and I saw that she had liked a couple of the stories that I had shared talking about it. I reached out to her and just said, hey, I think you would be amazing in this Poetic program. I know you have so much depth within you. If you want to talk about joining, send me a message. Obviously, there's no pressure. The message was something along those lines. And she replied to me saying that she had been looking at it and that she was really feeling called to it, but she didn't know if she was good enough at writing poetry, that she had never written a poem before, and that she didn't really know if she would be able to write poems like in the space. And that was her hesitation. And we had a little bit of a conversation around it, and she ended up joining. She did the first round, second, and third round. And she also did I did an alumni round where we wrote a collaborative poetry book. And she now has a published poetry book of her own. She also has published poems in the collaborative poetic book that is out as well. And they are so beautiful and so deep and so romantic and so amazing. And it was so amazing to witness that journey of going from, I don't know if I can even write a poem, to having a published poetry book and writing the most beautiful pieces that really resonate to the depth of life. If you're feeling the same, like you feel hesitation to join poetic or to even just start your own practice of writing poetry, sit down and write. Sit down and write, and it can open so much space within you. All right, let's now dive into pain. How to transform pain to peace through poetry. I want to start with, where did pain come from? A lot of us feel like we have this unresolved heaviness within us. It could be we feel it or sense it in our body, in our mind. There is some kind of pain or suffering or challenge. And I want to tell you now that you were born with generational and collective and cosmic wounding. There is nothing that you did for some of the pain and the heaviness that you carry within your body. No matter what type of childhood you had, you also experienced trauma from your childhood that left wounds and scars within you. And until you've given yourself the opportunity to go back and look at your childhood through an adult lens, you can't necessarily see the pain you're holding on to from your childhood that you didn't have the capacity to understand as a child. So it got suppressed in some way, and it may have become distorted and enlarged and manifested in different ways in your adult life. So there are so many ways that pain can be in your body. With the generational wounding, like think of the life that your parents lived, that your grandparents lived, that your great grandparents lived. Those lives were probably vastly different to yours. If you came from a family of immigrants where your family, whether it was your parents, grandparents, great grandparents, they either chose to or had to be removed from their land and are now on new land, even if it was a few generations ago, like that carries generational wounding in our body of like a feeling of displacement. There may have been poverty or scarcity through the generations, and that is in our blood and in our bones. And the way that had an impact on our parents and how they were raised, and our grandparents and how they raised our parents, like all of that can create this generational heaviness and pain that we carry, that we are not at fault for, and we didn't do anything to have that, but it's still in our body, and we have the opportunity to heal that for our family now and for ourselves, and heal that heaviness within ourselves. There's also so much collective wounding that we can take in by being members of the collective society. And there's cosmic wounding as well, which, challenges and karma that we are born with to alchemize for the collective. So there are so many different sources of your pain. And sometimes our mind can go in these circles of trying to understand, like, why do I feel this way? And why am I carrying this? And where did it come from? And poetry can be such a beautiful path to unravel those thoughts and get to the root of, when did this happen? And why did this happen? And is this something that I still need to carry? But poetry can also help us see where we don't actually need to understand. As long as we can feel it, we can heal it within ourselves. And the understanding can be that it just is what it is. I'm not saying that will be your journey, but when you give yourself the space to sit with it, and when you give yourself the space to write about it through your poetic writing, you give yourself space to gain the wisdom you need to from that experience. Because in a sense, it doesn't matter where it came from. It is in your body, and now you have the chance to heal it. But sometimes it does matter where it came from, and that's up to us to dive within those stories, to dive within ourselves, to dive within the wombs, unravel them, unearth the depth, to create stories out of them, to create healing out of them, to feel them. We can heal for ourselves, for our lineage, for the collective. And there are so many deep stories within you that will never make logical sense to the mind because they don't come from our current lived experience. It can be cosmic, it can be generational, it can be whatever. We don't need to know exactly where it originated from, just that it's in our body and we suppressed it in some way, and perhaps it got interwoven with other stories and other parts of our lived experience. Our mind can go in these endless circles trying to understand pain and the heaviness we feel in our body from a logical point of view. And the mind will never come to a logical conclusion and a logical point of view when it tries to understand emotions and the feelings within our body through a logical lens and a lens of reason. Yeah, there may be some dot points and cliff notes we can make that sound logical, but it will never be a satisfying conclusion that actually enriches your life, because your feelings and your body is far more intelligent than your mind and your thinking capacity. We don't have the thinking capacity to truly understand our body. We need understanding from our being and from our body. But the language of our body is through stories. So when we write in poetic ways and we bypass that thinking mind to understand through stories and through poetic language, we give ourselves the space for our mind to have an awareness and an understanding of what we can understand in our body when we feel the depth and the pain and the stories within us. And through that understanding and that awareness, we open the space for acceptance. And through acceptance, we open the portal to peace. We can transform the pain into peace through going through this journey of welcoming understanding within our body. And poetry is such a powerful practice to open the portal and open the space to really understand how we feel in our body and the depth and thoughts and everything that we have within our body. Your logical mind, your thoughts, your research, your opinions can often provide temporary relief, but it will never give you lasting grounded peace, because there needs to be full body understanding and acceptance for there to be true peace and grounded peace. And the peace comes with the acceptance. When it comes to getting to the root cause of our pain, this can be everything I've just said can be part of the path of getting to the root cause of our pain. But often the path is as simple as feeling, processing, and healing. There are multiple modalities, there are multiple practices, there are multiple ways that you can move through this path. And poetry is one of them. And poetry is a very key piece in the processing stage, but also in opening your capacity to feel at a deeper level. I'm not saying that writing one poem will heal you and make you into the perfect being that maybe part of you wants to be. Healing is a journey. Healing is something that we need to practice, because we can heal everything that we've already been through, but we are still living and in the world, and there are always going to be new things. But when we heal this deep heaviness we have within ourselves, we also expand our capacity to deal with the everyday stresses and the everyday traumas that may occur within our life, that we can heal in real time and in the moment, instead of suppressing that and just creating layers and layers and compounding the wounding and the pain and the heaviness and the density that we feel within our body. Poetry gives you a path to process, to understand through the body, to then alchemize, to transform your pain into peace and acceptance. Let's talk about the poetry portal. So I've dropped little bits of this already in, but the poetry portal is a portal that takes the thought or the story of the logical mind, of the thinking mind, and then bypasses that to take you into the body to see clearly and to understand within your being whatever the meaning or the insight or the wisdom within that pain or within that story or within that thought is. And the portal, I mentioned this at the beginning, is opened through the words, the verse, and the rhythm that we use within our expression, and the story and poetic language that we use through stories, through figurative language, rhythm, and the fictional elements that we write in. You get to the core of the emotion, you get to the root of the wound. And the fiction that you write in contains the essence of the reality, of the nonfiction, of the actual experience that you've had, but viewing it through a fictional or poetic lens, again, bypasses the thinking mind and lets you get into the body at a deeper level and at a deeper resonance. And it is through this full body understanding that your body creates the space to alchemize, to heal, to transform pain, and create space in your body that has space for lightness and peace and more enriching experiences to flow within your life, more enriching stories, more joy. And that's not to say that sadness and grief and anger and envy and all of those kind of emotions and feelings that we usually call negative, they're not bad. They're part of your human experience. They're part of the stories that we get to live as humans. But when we hold onto them as heaviness in our body, it can weigh us down from feeling truly enriched and alive within our life. This is not a quick fix to writing one bit of poetry and healing all your pain, but it is a fast-tracked path compared to only thinking things through and only using your awareness and your thinking mind to think about things in a logical way with reason. This is the power of shifting your perspective into a more poetic lens about the pain in your body, about the way you're living your life, about who you are, and about life itself. I love poetry and I love this power that it has. And I really encourage you to play with it and see how it feels within your body. Read a piece of poetry today. And if you have the capacity to write one sentence, you have the capacity to write poetry. You don't need to be afraid of what you may come face to face with inside yourself. Trust that your body has such a deep and high intelligence, and it knows what is serving for you to confront now and in what way. And it can create this grace and this softness around the way we confront things when we bring this poetic and figurative and fictional and like all the different poetic devices we can use to unearth what is within us. It brings softness because when we look at it through a story, we detach from taking it personally. It's just part of the story that we have lived, and that is okay, and that is amazing. And now we get to process it and perceive it in a different way that brings peace to our body. So I want you to know that you can have this deep trust within your body to bring you face to face with the depth you are ready to face and ready to heal and ready to alchemize and ready to write about in whatever way you do. So I want you to take a little moment now or today to pick up your pen and write. You can pause the video if you would like to. I'm going to give you a prompt. And through this prompt, I just simply want you to have your pen and your paper ready and just write what comes through. The first thought in your mind, the first feeling, write, and then continue to write. And you can set a 5-minute timer, giving yourself that structure to build a little more safety. You don't need to be completely open-ended. It can feel a little more daunting when you do that. And having the prompt on the page kind of removes that dauntingness that can come with a completely blank page. So trust that. Just trust and play with whatever comes through. Let the rhythm find you. Your poetry doesn't even have to rhyme, and it doesn't need to be deep. So the prompt is, I am me when ... I am me when ... So pause the video when you're ready, and I want you just to have a little bit of writing. Write whatever comes through and let it be a poetic expression that comes from the depth of you. You become a poet by writing. There's no other way to do it. You can't think your way into being poetic. You can't think your way into being a poet. You can't think your way into writing poetry. You have to write it. It's the only way to do it. So write to that prompt. And welcome back. If you paused or do it at the end of this video, I want to talk a little bit about the poetic experience. Poetic is a 7-week program where you get to be expressive in a new way to uncover these different parts of yourself. You get to really activate your voice. You get to play with the depth within you. You get to expand your capacity to write poetry, move through everything I've talked about, but also open up so much more within you. This program has the space for the healing and the transformation that I've talked about, and also for fun and having fun and having an enriching experience with life itself through writing and giving yourself the space to be artistic and creative in a different way, in a new way than perhaps you have been. It doesn't matter if you've written 1 poem or 0 poems, or if you've written many poems in your life. If this is a space you feel called to, trust that this is the space you will expand into the poet within you that wants to write, that has so much to say and wants the space to say it. Your voice will become more deeply connected to your body. When you become expressive through poetry, you become more expressive through your everyday conversation and your everyday thoughts as well. You open a channel to your thoughts to naturally weave together, to make sense of them, to uncover the stories and the depth within you. This will be an intimate group of women, and there is so much power in allowing yourself to be seen and heard. This is something I've heard from a few people that have been a little hesitant to join, is that having to share what they write. And I want to say that you're in full control of what you share. We do go around and everyone gets the opportunity to share the poetry they have written. And it is exciting. It is exciting to write these beautiful things that have come out of you. But you can read just 1 sentence if you want to. You can read your full piece if you want to. You can even expand on where you want to go in the rest of the piece. We have writing space in every call, and I give you a prompt in every call. So you're not writing from a completely open page. We create the structure that creates safety to your body to get into a flow to write. Hearing the poetry from the other women is so powerful as well. Often there are these common threads between all our pieces because I guide you through a channeling practice, and usually, we're connected to that same channel. So there are the universal themes and the common threads really come through, and it is so powerful to feel that resonance with what everyone else writes. And I share my writing as well, and it is so powerful for you to share, but know that you are in control of what you choose to share. And there's also the group chat where you can share your writing between the calls as well. If this is something you're feeling called to, I want you to really like feel into your body and trust that call. Like, now is the time to do something like this. Often we can say like, I'll do the next round or I'll do it next time. And, you know, there are people that have said that I've been running this program for well over a year, I think almost even 2 years now. And like, there's always people that say, I'll do it next time, but now is the time. We only get to make choices in this time and in this moment. And the edge, that little bit of discomfort you're feeling towards joining, is like you just pushing on the edge of your comfort zone. But that is where you find expansion in your life. And the expansion of the most poetic version of you is such a beautiful journey for you to take. This may be something that is just so completely new to you, writing poetry, but maybe even being in a group program. And I want you to really honor that it is a brave decision to lean into that edge and make the decision to move past it and go into this expansive space of the unknown. But you and your voice and your poetry will be so welcomed into this space, no matter your experience levels in anything that I've mentioned. So you don't need to delay this experience and delay this expression that wants to come out from within you. This round of Poetic begins next week on the 21st of February. Our live calls will be Friday mornings. That is in Australian Melbourne, Australian Eastern Standard Daylight Time, the same time as Melbourne time zone. It is 7 weeks. It is 299 Australian dollars. There are payment plans available. I am very flexible with the payment plans. You can do a payment plan up to 3 months in whatever frequency of payment works for you. If you have any questions at all, please reach out to me. I would love to have a conversation with you. If you want to have a little chat about if this is the right option for you, we'll have a little chat about what's drawing you to it, any questions you have, and I will be very honest with you if I think this is the right fit for you. But if you're curious and if you're feeling called into it, then I'm 99% sure it will be a really beautiful and enriching space for you. So please reach out if you have any questions. Join now. Like, this is your time to be the most poetic version of you. I'm so excited for everyone that is going to be in the poetic experience for 7 beautiful weeks together. Thank you so much for being here. Sending you so much love. I'm recording this on Valentine's Day. So happy Valentine's Day. The collective air, love in the air vibes are filtered through the frequency of this transmission from me. So thank you so much for being here. Sending you so much love. Please reach out if you want to chat about joining Poetic or any questions or anything that you want to share from this masterclass. Thank you. Sending you big love.